Wildfires are once again raging across the country, prompting hundreds if not thousands of Canadians to have to flee their homes and their way of life during this wildfire season. Now, each province and jurisdiction has responded differently to these wildfires, but no province has received as much attention and controversy for its response to the wildfires than Nova Scotia, led by Premier Tim Houston. Last week, Tim Houston imposed a blanket ban on anyone stepping foot in the woods for any activity.
Effective 4 p.m. today, we're telling Nova Scotians, stay out of the woods. We are restricting travel and activities that really aren't necessary for most of us. Hiking, camping, fishing, and the use of vehicles in the woods are not permitted. Trail systems through woods are off limits. Camping is allowed, but only in official campgrounds. The fine for violating any of these bans is the same as the fine for the ban on burning, $25,000.
Entering the woods will get you a $25,000 ticket, stepping foot in the woods. But the ban in Nova Scotia goes even further, because under these rules, it is an offense to invite someone onto your own private property and enter into a wooded area, which you own. So it is an offense to invite any other person to enter a wooded area that you own under these new rules, which are in effect until October 15th. There's also, of course, a burn ban, which I fully endorse, by the way. I do think that when you have wildfire conditions like this, it should be illegal to start fires. There's a burn ban in New Brunswick. In New Brunswick as well, the Premier recently closed off all access to Crown land. Now, in Newfoundland, there are extremely harsh penalties for violating the burn ban. There are fines of up to $100,000 and even a year in prison. Again, when it comes to a burn ban, I support that. But when you're talking about making it illegal for people in a province which is mostly woods to enter the woods, you're obviously looking at something which is a clear overreach. What's important to note about Nova Scotia right now, despite having the harshest rules in place to prevent wildfires, Nova Scotia, compared to other provinces in the country, has seen a pretty mild year when it comes to wildfires, according to the province's own natural resources minister. We have had about 100 wildfires this season. They've all been small and put out quickly, but that could change in a heartbeat in these dry conditions. That is why Afghanistan war veteran Jeff Evely last week decided to challenge the Nova Scotia woods ban in protest and document this experience in a very professional way.
This is the DNR office on Mountain Road in Coxheath, Nova Scotia, and this is not the woods. But back here, this is the woods. So I have a couple of conservation officers with me right now who are not on camera but have advised me that if I go into the woods, if I defy their orders to go into the woods, then I will be fined, and they also said that they would double my fine to $50,000. So I'm going to walk down here and go into these woods, walking in the woods.
Summary offense ticket for today's date. Your information, Forest Act 25 sub 1. Fine is $28,872.50.
Okay. I thought it was $25,000. It's $28,870.
Court costs, victim fees.
Taxes.
Oh, victim fees.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Yeah.
All right, so joining me now is the man you just saw in that video, Canadian veteran Jeff Evely. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Harrison. Thanks for having me.
So the first thing I want to ask you is that given the draconian, drastic measures the province has taken, I'm guessing that the province is really being consumed by wildfires. Is where you're living right now, really in wildfire danger?
Not as far as I am aware. There were no active fires when they brought the ban in.
Okay, so that's strange to me because New Brunswick has a ban which is not as drastic as Nova Scotia's. There are other, burn bans around the country, but those places seem to have more forest fires than Nova Scotia. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. There were about 100 fires in Nova Scotia at the time they imposed the ban, but an average season is more like 160.
And this particular ban that Nova Scotia has put in, that no Nova Scotian is allowed to set foot in the woods, this is not the first time this has been brought in.
They did bring it in 2023. It was a blanket ban across the entire province while there were no active fires on Cape Breton Island, where I live. So I thought that it was an overreach at that time. I submitted an application for judicial review on charter grounds to have the courts review this proclamation in light of our rights under the charter. At that time, the court declined to hear it. They would not award me standing because there was no financial harm. They said, had I gotten fined, then I would have had standing. So when they brought the blanket ban back in again this year, I knew on day one exactly what I was going to do. I was going to take the fine and get this in front of a judge so that we can have them rule on the constitutionality of these measures.
And if you could, what exactly is the ban in place? Because we're reading that there is some sort of ban for guests of people on private property. There is obviously a blanket ban for just entering the woods. What does that technically mean? And do we have that right? What is the ban?
Like no activity in the woods. So hiking, fishing, hunting, ATVing, basically all of the things associated with cultural life in Nova Scotia. And I think it's Article 26 under the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights that says, that cultural participation in a person's community is vital to their self-actualization, and so should not be interfered with. So even their precious UN kind of backs me up on this. I think the issue that you were just referencing there with respect to private land was very well demonstrated by a good friend of mine in the local area named Darlene LeBlanc. She lives in the woods, okay? And this is kind of the point of the mockery that I made of the whole situation in the first video that I put up that, pretty much went viral, pretty close. And it was about, I think it's at about 850,000 views now. But the first one that I did, where I was demonstrating the absurdity of these measures by pointing to the areas that they had taped off in the park where I walk my dog as the woods, and the areas that we were walking through as not the woods. Nova Scotia is the woods. And if you take a look at Darlene's property, you will understand exactly what I mean. She lives on a 10-acre property, and the amount of space without any trees is very small. So she could go walking around in the woods on her property because her ownership of that land mitigates the fire hazard introduced by her sneakers. But if I were to bring my sneakers to that same land, my sneakers would be a fire hazard because I don't own that land.
So, in your opinion, what do the majority of Nova Scotian residents think of this? Because from the national media, I get the impression that the only people who are taking issue with this are from outside of the province.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't that Lisa Raitt or somebody like that who said that? Somebody else, a radio host, had asked me this the other day in Toronto, and I was like, well, I don't know what data she's relying on there. It sounds made up. Anecdotally, well, I think I said it sounds anecdotal. And, anecdotally, from my perspective, the overwhelming majority of the response that I've seen from Nova Scotians has been positive. I have had some trolls, they are just despicable. They say all the nastiest things that they can possibly imagine and consistently drag my service into it. And that's, I think, a good way to make it really easy to tell who the good guys are in this fight. So thanks for that, trolls. I appreciate it. It's heartening.
What do you say to people who look at the video you posted that got millions of views on X of you challenging the ban? When people, what's your response to people who say that you're just being selfish? You're just putting yourself in danger and forcing other people to come and ticket you, and you're not considering the greater good of society. What's your response to that?
Well, I think every atrocity in the history of the world was committed in the name of the greater good. I'm pretty sure Slobodan Milosevic would have made such an argument at the time that he was engaged in ethnic cleansing in the Balkans. And that is the kind of mentality that leads to exactly that kind of situation. So I find that we're in very dangerous territory. We have rights for a reason. It's a matter of survivability. And in nations where there are no such rights, in totalitarian societies, we see that people do not survive as well, and they certainly do not thrive as well. They don't reach their potential anywhere near the way that we do out here in the West. So there are plenty of good reasons for these rights in the first place.
It seems to me that, well, I would say this, several years ago when these wildfires really popped on the country, the argument that we were hearing was that this is an example of climate change, that these wildfires are happening because we are destroying the climate. And if that is the case, then why are we banning people from these forest areas in the first place? It seems that this ban is clear evidence that governments actually recognize that these fires are primarily human caused.
Well, it seems to me like in the totalitarian vernacular, climate change means arson, because that was the cause of the Nova Scotia wildfires in 2023. Now, the 22-year-old man who set the Barrington fire, which was by far the largest of the Nova Scotia wildfires in 2023, he was charged with lighting a fire on private property without permission, failing to take steps to prevent that fire from spreading, and leaving that fire unattended, but not arson. So I think that if our leaders were really interested in preserving the forests, they would stop yammering on about climate change and actually prosecute left-wing, climate zealot eco-terrorists to the full extent of the law.
Now, Jeff, some of the people that have criticized the actions you have taken and the positions others have taken from against this measure are saying this is not overreach. This is, the premier is well within his right to do this. This has happened before. Why are you all so concerned about this? Why is this such a big deal? What do you say to people who say that? Because there are lots of them on social media saying this is not totalitarian.
Well, there are, I think, a couple of questions in there. I'll start with the overreach. Under our Constitution, we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and in accordance with that, any measures that the government wants to put in place need to be minimally impairing with respect to my liberties, and logically connected to the goal. I think that those are the two grounds on which I'm going to fight this, because it is not minimally impairing of my liberties. There were a number of steps that they could have taken to mitigate the risk of fire in the woods, namely like to ban sources of ignition, to ban burning, those kinds of things, well before they got to the point where they would ban my sneakers from the woods. And that is a good segue into the next point on logical connection to the goal, because there is no logical connection between banning my sneakers and preventing wildfires. So it is not the case that we live in an authoritarian society where the state is God and we got to do whatever they say. These politicians and these leaders are subject to the same rule of law as the rest of us, and the Constitution applies to everybody in Canada. So, this is the issue that I'm raising. It's that the province is acting in an illegal, unconstitutional manner. It's not that I violated any law either, by the way. I have violated a proclamation that was made under Section 25(1) of the Nova Scotia Forests Act. And that basically says that the minister can do whatever the heck he wants at any time. So if they're going to take the position that that somehow supersedes our Constitution, then I think that the Nova Scotia Forests Act is ultra vires, in my amateur legal opinion. And why is it so important? Well, I kind of touched on it already. It is a matter of survival that our rights are protected, and that we have these feedback mechanisms in our system, because any system without feedback is unstable. So, when we start doing away with our rights and our ability to assert those rights, what we're going to see is basically mass death. That's what usually comes after that, and totalitarianism, of course. So suffering on an unimaginable scale. And also, on the note of importance, I would say that these freedoms and these rights, these are the legacy of our fallen soldiers. And we are a nation who says, lest we forget, not to remind ourselves to get out there and have another funeral once a year for these guys, but lest we forget what they stood for, and lest we forget that we all have a sacred civic duty to safeguard that inheritance for future generations. That's why we are a nation who sings, "We stand on guard for thee." So, I think that we're going through a period of authoritarianism once in a human lifetime. The specter of global tyranny looms large, and this is our time to rise up. So my hope is that with the video that I posted of me making an appointment to go in and get my fine, and the courteous and professional nature of the interaction will serve as an example for others to put the civil back in civil disobedience. I think that's something that's been lost in the last several years, is that we've lost our civility, and that others will marshal their courage and rise to the occasion.
Well, one individual who really didn't seem to like your actions, or even the National Post, for whatever reason, he decided to single out the National Post and Post Media for writing what is, in his opinion, is in defense of you, is Scott Reid, the former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Paul Martin. I want to play this for you. This is what he said yesterday on a podcast about the people who are opposing the Nova Scotia woods ban. Take a listen to this.
Like these people, man, these people who don't step foot in the woods, right? Who don't live there, and they don't have any practical experience with this. They decide that this is a nice National Review, modern mega argument that they want to elicit. Like, you're going to look a firefighter in the face who's busting their guts, right, risking their life to try to not just to try to contain this thing. And all they're saying is, you know what, like, let's not make the problem worse, okay? Give us a chance at trying to get our hands around this thing. And these people are sitting in Toronto, in a cafe writing, because the Post Media editor said, we'd like 3 more articles on this. And they're all wound up about how, oh, my rights are being trampled on. This is the problem. This drives me crazy. I'm going to my mind, what's the defining characteristic of MAGA, of this whole sort of, post-COVID, pushback, conservative sort of thought line, small c conservative, whatever it is, all that convoy conservatism, right? It's selfishness. It's just undisguised selfishness. I want to do it. I have no sense of community, no sense of obligation to my neighbors, family, friends. If it's what I want to do, then I'm a hero. Now, these are the same people who will stand in their driveway with a bottle of beer and and moan about why isn't the government cracking down on those that break the law and do this and do that. Why don't they enforce it? But it's when they enforce something they dislike, well, then they are all they're all freedom fighters. You.
So, Jeff, the common thread here is selfishness and people who have never stepped foot in the woods. I got to get your reaction to that, because this man is having some sort of breakdown over people standing up for their rights, it appears.
Yeah, and he's lying because the firefighters were not in the woods battling an active wildfire when I, cut a corner of the woods within 90 seconds in order to get that fine. Subjecting myself to having to fight a $28,872.50 fine is hardly an act of selfishness. I'm not sure exactly what benefit is conferred on me personally, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't denigrate anybody for acting in their self-interest either, so long as you bring no harm to another or put them at an unacceptable level of risk. People should act in their self-interests because other people will tread upon you and basically treat you like a doormat if you let them. So you do need to assert yourself. You need to assert your rights, and you need to use your own judgment. And that would be acting in your self-interest.
Let me ask you this, because it's no secret that Tim Houston, your premier, seems to have eyes for a higher job. Seems to be potentially angling to be the leader of the federal Conservative Party if he can oust Pierre Poilievre. We've seen the videos, and it's pretty obvious that there is something there. Is Tim Houston a popular guy in Nova Scotia? And as someone who is, lives in the province he runs, do you feel like Tim Houston would be a good prime minister?
God, no. He's a tyrant. Now, is he popular? I don't know. He won kind of a supermajority in the last election, but there was nobody to vote for. That was the first election I was ever eligible to vote in where I did not vote because I was like, I can't vote for any of these guys in good conscience. There's no way. He famously got elected on a promise not to bring in the vaccine passports or mandates, and then proceeded to do exactly that within days of being elected. And, we saw 10 times the number of COVID deaths in Nova Scotia in January of 2022 when those mandates came into effect, compared to November of 2021, 10 times the number of COVID deaths. Sure looks like mass murder to me, and he has yet to answer for that. I wouldn't put this guy in charge of organizing a bathroom break for a Boy Scout troop. The weak man leads with a heavy hand, and there's a certain level of courage that's required for senior leadership. He's an accountant. He's got all the backbone of a baby jellyfish being poured out of a shot glass. And, Seneca once said that all cruelty springs from weakness. So I think that that's what we see, is that the rest of us have to suffer under these cruel measures due to the weakness of Tim Houston.
One question I have for you is, if you were in the position to make rules for Nova Scotia, if you were in Tim Houston's shoes, what kind of rules would you put in place or measures would you put in place to try to fight these wildfires?
What wildfires? I think prevent, the burning is there's no debating that. Obviously, like, we should have a ban on burning. They seem to be, if I'm not mistaken, can you still burn in a campground? Maybe I'm mistaken about that. But you're allowed to camp in an official campground. You're not allowed to camp in the woods. So if you're a young guy who can't afford these expensive campgrounds, and I know somebody in this situation, then you're going to have to cancel your summer. What I would put in place would definitely be a burn ban, and I would be open to hearing other arguments. I know that ATVs are banned, for example. I don't really know what the hazard is with an ATV being brought into the woods. I don't know the quantifiable risk. How often do ATVs cause fires? This kind of thing. It seems plausible to me that that there could be some elevated risk of a fire where an ATV is present. So that kind of thing would have to be weighed. But when it comes to just fishing or just hiking or just hunting, I don't think that we're anywhere near that. And the thing is that, even in the case of hunting, I guess there's a risk of, sparks and things like this. But the woods are not the real fire hazards in a situation like that. From being lit up with a single spark. It's an open grassland, and you can see it around here everywhere you go. Like, If there's an open field, then the grass is yellow because it's hot and dry there. But if you look in the woods, it's shaded and moist. So again, these are things that need to be considered with care. They need to be relying on data. I see no evidence of any like logic, reason, any data being put into this. So just off the top of my head, I think that some of the activities that I just mentioned would be reasonable, but you know, I don't have the data in front of me, and we haven't really weighed all this out to determine what is the risk appetite here, what our threshold is. But certainly walking, fishing, and you know, and even camping, like you know, no stoves, this kind of thing. I could see that, of course. But you know, where there's no source of ignition, with me walking my dog in the woods, clearly, clearly, like such a measure would be unreasonable with respect to fire prevention.
And the last question I have for you is the support you have received since making the video, receiving that ticket, and really staging this protest. Are there organizations that are helping you to fight this in any way? And if so, can you tell us who they are and what you're planning to do?
Yeah, the JCCF reached out right away. I was thrilled and heartened to know that those guys are in my corner. They funded my legal defense for my convoy charges. Chris Fleury was my lawyer for that. I think he's a great guy and an excellent lawyer. So it looks like I'm going to be working with Chris again on this. I just signed the retainer last night. I'm really happy to be working with them. I think that they're great people and a great organization that is vital to the protection of our rights here in Canada. If you want to help me, you know, fight this fine, then please donate to the JCCF at jccf.ca. I'm not going to be taking any money. I'm not doing any fundraising. I just pinned a tweet this morning. Like I have tweeted this a couple of times, and I said, you know what, I should pin something just to let everybody know that anybody out there who's starting a Give, Send, Go or GoFundMe or any of that stuff to solicit for donations on my behalf, they are grifting. I'm not taking any money. If you want to help me, just donate to the JCCF, please and thank you.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for. I want to just make this point clear that this is not to diminish the serious and real implications of wildfires across the country. And to all of the firefighters and members of the armed forces who are fighting these fires, God bless you all. To everyone watching, thank you all for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.